What a lot of people mix up is we're trying to make direct sales. That's not actually what we're here to do. That's like the Mickey Mouse version of an addict. Like if you're here to make a little bit of money, cool. But if you're here to like really seriously change everything in 10 years from now, you got to get into like a duplication engine, right? And this duplication engine doesn't just apply to what I just finished explaining, because that was a very local, hands-on, in-person, traditional networking kind of way of doing it. This also exists with social media. This also exists with ads. This also exists with Zoom. There's a whole process to all of these versions, but you yourself have to audit and be like, if someone was watching me from the outside, from my team, is there any consistency here? Am I doing similar things every single day? Am I following a checklist or some kind of daily method of operation at all? Or is it literally day to day, just like, I'm in the mood for this, I'm not in the mood for that? And someone watching be like, I have no idea what they're doing. Like, it's just all random shit. When I first learned what we're talking about, it wasn't in network marketing, it wasn't in direct sales, it wasn't in an Agic. It was actually when I did door-to-door sales. And I went and did door-to-door sales. I knocked on people's doors. I had conversations. I had sort of like a general framework and a script that I would follow. And I kind of made it my own. So I wasn't rigid, like word for word every single time, like ignoring the uniqueness of the conversation. It wasn't quite like that. It was more like a framework, like 5 parts. Start part 1. When we kind of conclude to that section, we go to the next section. So it was quite flexible, but I learned that framework, and that framework was what guided me. So if I ever felt like I fell off or conversation got weird about some random topic or something like that, I knew kind of how to bring it back. But then what happened was I started doing so well with my sales that I got asked to be promoted to a sales manager, where I was now teaching other people exactly how to make money, which is similar in this business, where it's now kind of based on rank in a way. You start as a 1A, you're just trying to make direct sales, and eventually you're starting to make them regularly and consistently, and you have a little team built into the model. And so you're at 4A, 5A, 6A, you're kind of starting to graduate into management or training or leadership, whatever you want to call it. And then it's time to basically go, here's what I've been doing, here's what I've been saying, here's how I've been operating day to day. And now you're going to give those keys basically back to the next person, hoping they get a similar result. But typically that's not what happens. What happens is you think you're giving them the keys, but it's incomplete, because so much of it is subconscious. It is things that you don't think are relevant, beliefs, values, mindset, who you are, your past experiences, your childhood, your upbringing, all these things that you're not really going to put into the manual of this is what you do, because you don't think it's relevant, but in fact, it really is very relevant. And so that happened to me with door-to-door sales. Is I would teach them, okay, do this, say this, stand like this, whatever. And then they weren't able to get the same result as me. And I actually got to the point I got so frustrated of what I started to think was I just wasted 80% of my time training these new people, and they're not getting sales. If I would have just went and knocked doors by myself for that same time, I would have made hundreds of dollars in that day. And so my natural thought was to retreat, to pull back and go, screw management, screw building a team. I'm good. I know what I'm doing. And if I have a goal of $500 a day or $1,000 a day, I know I can count on me. So I'm going to go do that. So I actually declined the manager position. I gave it back. I said, no, thanks. I tried it. It's not for me. I'm too frustrated with all these losers who can't figure it out. I blamed all of them. I said, these people are dumb. This isn't hard. What's wrong with them? And I got to the point of just really being like egocentric, like I'm the shit, they suck, it's their fault, and basically went back and did my own thing. And I did that for another 6 months or so. And as I did that, I realized like there's no leverage here. There's only one of me. At the end of the day, I still only have so many opportunities to knock doors and whatnot until I run out of time. And so I am still capped. So I started to mature and realize like maybe it is me. And maybe I need to become a better teacher. Maybe I need to be more aware of some of the underlying things that who I am and how I'm showing up and the nuances of how I say things, why I say them, and so on, and actually understand how to transfer these things to people and teach these things to people. And so I kind of went back for round two and I said, okay, this time I'm going to do it a little bit differently and ask different questions and try to improve. And that was when I paid attention to so-called like the details. And those details were, for example, how I dressed. The first time around, I never played much in, never even considered it, but I had sort of a uniform. I had an appearance. I did things unconsciously that I now was able to articulate and teach. And all of a sudden the results got much better. I kind of taught people how to joke around and build rapport and ask certain things in a certain way where you're kind of guaranteed to get a similar response every single time. That kind of dropped people's guards and made them feel more comfortable and all this kind of thing. And then I got to a point even greater than that where it was like the self-confidence thing. And I've shared this in the past. You may have heard me talk about this, but to a point where like the goal was to get into someone's home, which is kind of sounds weird. But like if you're standing at someone's front door and you're outside and they're in their home, your level of influence on this person is going to be much lower because you're like an outsider of their home. Literally, there's like an invisible line at your front door. But if I can step into your home, now subconsciously I'm a guest. You've invited me into your home. So now there's this level of friendliness. There's no longer a threat because you wouldn't have a threat welcomed into your home. So I would find a way to invite myself in very lightheartedly, very casually, where they're like, yeah, sure, I guess, come on. You know what I mean? It was a little bit awkward for a second, like, all right. And then once I was in, I'd be like taking off my jacket and like handing it to them. They didn't say like, can I have your jacket like a guest and hang it in the closet? I would take it off and just extend my hand and give them my jacket. And what are you going to do? Naturally grab it, kind of look at it. I guess I'll put it on a coat hanger or something, put it in the closet. So I did a lot of these things to sort of guide them and lead them. So I was lead them with my jacket. I'd lead them. I'd be like, do you want to sit here in the living room or do you prefer the kitchen table? Two questions, very simple, answer one or the other. So I started to teach these things and got pretty good at it. And then as my confidence grew, because I was basically getting into every single person's home very consistently, like occasionally someone would say no, like, and I would always be surprised. I'm like, oh, all right, then I guess I'll stand in the rain, but whatever. Like, you know, I kind of almost like make them feel like an idiot for not letting me come inside. And then I do these like cocky things where I like invite myself to dinner. They would tell me like, oh, we're having dinner soon. I say, no problem. What are we having? They're like, what? And then they would tell me like burgers or spaghetti or something. I'm like, oh, I love spaghetti. Like, you know, make me a bowl of that. You know, I'm hungry out here, man. The streets are wild. Like I haven't eaten all day, like all these jokes, and it would work. Then I'd take like fruit out of their fruit bowl and literally not ask for permission, or like if I could have one, I just take an apple out of the fruit bowl and start eating it while I'm talking. And they're just like looking at me like, who does this guy think he is? But because of that, it made me appear like that's just what I do. You know what I mean? Like I would never grab an apple if I wasn't a professional and I wasn't like assuming that I would get the deal. You know what I mean? Like that's the level of confidence. Is like it's past confident. It's like, who the fuck do you think you are? But I kind of like it. Like it's a very interesting like ascension on the ladder. So the point that I'm bringing this all up to you is I was able to start teaching some of these things that were shock, like had a bit of a shock value to it as well. And people would try it. They'd be like, Balazs, there's no way. Like the people I'm training, right? My team, they'd say, there's no way I'm going to grab an apple and eat it. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared to do that. And I'll be like, well, just try it out and let me know how it goes. They tried out, like, it worked. Oh my God. And like the apple was so good. Like I got the sale. And I was like, see, it's like an actual strategy. So back to you is you have given people resources. You have done these things. Now what you need to look at when we do this like audit is what are the blind spots? What are the things that you have actually done consistently for a long time that have been omitted from these resources that you gave because you personally thought they weren't relevant? You're like, it's just me, it's just what I do. But there is these little clues of maybe the way you've been doing your social media, or the way that you did your content, or the way that you spoke about things, your income, your results, whatever it may have been, that you didn't put into these resources and processes, but that was like the glue that held it all together. And without that secret sauce or that pizzazz or charisma or whatever you want to call it, without that, the process doesn't really work. Does this make sense? So you now need to go back. You need to go back and audit your own stuff that you're giving people and pretend that you forget everything else that you do and be like, if I only did what I'm providing them, would it still work? And you'll very quickly be like, well, I actually left that out and I kind of do this and I didn't tell them to do that. And I do this as well. And you'll probably find a bunch of things that you'll be able to incorporate as a bit of a additional layer of teaching, and you'll be very surprised. Now, the next thing to take it another notch is role playing and practice. So a lot of the times we just expect people to practice the things that we're giving them, resources, tools, scripts, whatever, on real live humans, real people that we could be helping. That's nuts if you think about it. Like we're literally playing with people's lives. We're playing with people's futures. We're playing with people's dreams. And we're just kind of like shrugging our shoulders if it doesn't work out, when like everything could have changed for this person if we were more skilled and we were more rehearsed and we had put in more time in practice. So creating a space, whether it's an additional call every single week that you do, not your typical team call, but like one extra call. And that call is just live role playing, literally pretending like you are doing a Zoom call with a real client. And what happens is if someone, let's say they did a Zoom sales call and they felt like it was a for sure sale and this lead was saying all the right things and asking all the right questions, and they were just so confident that the sale was going to go through, and they did the sales call and it didn't, and they're really bummed out about it and super disappointed, and some kind of objection came up or like a situation they couldn't figure out happen, have them be the prospect on the training call. And then they actually gain confidence by pretending to be this lead that didn't convert. So now they're like, oh, and saying all the same things, right? That kind of stumped them. And then yourself or someone else who's producing sales regularly in your team, which in this case sounds like it's not really anybody, so it would be you would be the one speaking now. So it would be like a hypothetical scenario where your team member is presenting to you this complicated situation that they weren't able to close. And now you would walk them through and say what you would normally say. And you can record those calls and you can put them into like a video file, replays for people to watch later on and build a bunch of like scenarios for people. The next thing is, after the role playing and whatnot, the third thing that you can do is actually do these calls with them together. So the thing that helped me the most in the early days is I used more of an apprentice model where we spent a lot of time together, but it wasn't just talking about what we would do. It was you watching me do it in real time, you listening to me do the call, you listening to me in a live in-person meeting. So I was very closely working with just a small number of people. If I did a three-way call, my person was on the call, eavesdropping, listening to everything. It wasn't like, I'll do the call for you and let you know how it goes. No, what are you talking about? Because I'm going to paraphrase, I'm going to miss out on the specific details. And not only that, but having a third person listening, their perception of the conversation will be a little bit different than my perception. So then when we debrief after the call is over, they might ask me certain questions about, why did you say that? And what happened in this moment? And then it actually gives me like a prompt to be able to go, good point, let's talk about it and go deeper. And that is also like one of the fastest way to train somebody, if that makes sense. So I was very hands-on and very closely working with people for two reasons. Number one, they would observe me, body language, tonality, words, questions, humor, jokes, rapport building, the way that I visually would draw the comp plan and the cash flow quadrant and certain things that educated them in the middle of the presentation. And they would be observing and watching all of this rather than it being like theory in a call or a training video or something. And once again, the certain like specific little nuances are not being captured because it's not a real live sale. It's let's talk about making a sale versus like, I just made a sale in front of you. And then as the sort of expectation that I would set for people is that I would do your calls and do your meetings and whatnot through edification, where you'd do the introduction, you'd edify me as a top leader, top producer, share my story and so on, and sort of like build me up. Then I would come into the call, bring myself right back down to super relatable, down to earth. I'm a regular person, just been doing this for a long time, which would make the prospect very comfortable because it wasn't like, look at me, I'm big time. It was more like they would say I was big time and I'd be like, but I'm not big time, and bring it back down. So there was They would still get the credibility, third party from the person introducing me, but I would be like, none of that matters. Let's just ignore that for a second. And then I'd share the part of my story that's like, I came from the bottom, I started with nothing, which is all true, but that's what I would focus on to make them feel comfortable, lower their guard, and have a great conversation. And then towards the end, I would then hype up the person who introduced me, because the last thing that you want to have happen is the prospect wants to join you instead of the person who introduced you, which happens all the time if you do it wrong, right? So they make the introduction, you're the shit, and then they're like, well, actually now after basically hearing your story and all of your success and all this kind of stuff, can I just work with you? I'm like, fuck that guy. And that's not fair. That's not the way the business is supposed to go. So you have to be very careful to weave it in to be like, this guy's an up and coming superstar. They're going to be one of the top leaders. They're doing all the right things, and working with them is a huge, huge advantage because they're in the earlier part of their career, which means they're more available. They have more time for you. They can support you better than I can. I'm way too busy. You know what I mean? So I'm like purposely being like, you don't want to work with me. Trust me, it's not a good idea. This guy or this girl, whatever. And then you build them back up. So right as they start having that thought of like, cut this person out, you redirect to be like, no, this is the best decision for you. And then typically like 99% of the time, they don't have a problem with buying from the person that they should be buying from, who introduced you. So that was my process. And I took that all the way from 1A to 4A, pretty much very hands-on, doing it in front of them so they could learn. And I would tell them, look, you're probably going to hear me make this sale or this conversation, presentation, etc., 5 to 10 times max. That's how many times you have to listen and learn. If you didn't figure it out by then, you're fucked, because I'm not going to help you after that, because I got other people to help. You know, this isn't like a lifelong thing. This is like a temporary training, apprenticeship. Learn what you got to learn, and then you're on your own to duplicate and replicate exactly what you learned from me. And usually that would give them such a sense of urgency of like, okay, like it's game time. Like I don't have forever to learn this. I have 5 to 10 opportunities depending on how it goes. And then as soon as that would happen and they would hit 4A, I would flip it and I'd say, now you're going to do everything and I'm going to stick around and listen to you, and make sure you're not saying things wrongly, like by accident. And if you are, that's okay. I will just add like a little bit of extra coaching and say, hey, you actually kind of explained the comp plan wrong or incorrectly. It's actually like this. And they'd be like, oh, okay, yeah, my bad. And then the next call, they would say it the right way on that particular thing. Maybe I catch a couple other things, and I would help them get to a place of, if I wasn't there and I wasn't even listening, this call would have gone really, really well without me. And that would give me, as a sponsor, as a coach, that reassurance, like I just duplicated officially. Like that's what duplication is I created a self-sustainable person who knows what I know, understands what I understand, can explain it the way that I do it, and generate a sale. And now the beautiful part about this is their firsthand experience was on how to duplicate their people. Because what are they going to do? They're going to do what you did. So when they're thinking like, well, how do I train my person? They're going to be like, well, what did Balazs do? He got on the phone with me. We did this whole edification thing. We did 5 to 10 meetings together. You know, I basically presented and they listened, and then we switched. So their whole mindset is like, that's what I got to do. So then imagine now on the second and third level where they're doing 5 to 10 meetings for their new person, they're explaining everything to them, and so on and so on. So there's a very much like an instant leverage duplication happening. And you do that on 2, 3, 4 levels deep, and then it won't stop. And that's the whole game that we're playing here in the business. And what a lot of people mix up is we're trying to make direct sales, but it's not actually what we're here to do. That's like the Mickey Mouse version of an magic. Like if you're here to make a little bit of money, cool. But if you're here to like really seriously change everything in 10 years from now, you got to get into like a duplication engine, right? And this duplication engine doesn't just apply to what I just finished explaining, because that was a very local, hands-on, in-person, traditional networking kind of way of doing it. This also exists with social media. This also exists with ads. This also exists with Zoom. There's a whole process to all of these versions, but you yourself have to audit and be like, if someone was watching me from the outside, from my team, is there any consistency here? Am I doing similar things every single day? Am I following a checklist or some kind of daily method of operation at all? Or is it literally day to day, just like I'm in the mood for this, I'm not in the mood for that? And someone watching be like, I have no idea what they're doing. Like It's just all random shit. And that's where a lot of people fall under that category. It's just all random. So everybody go back after this call and just take a look and be like, are my conversations similar in the DMs? Is my content posting every day got some sort of formula that could be taught? What about my sales calls? If I listen to 10 of your sales calls in a row, are they going to sound anywhere remotely the same? Or are you all over the place every single time? Make sense? So that is everybody's goal. And you should be judging your success of your organization through this lens of duplicatable processes, formulas, frameworks, systems, and that's the goal. And once you crack the code to this, you will start to see insane results in your team. And that's why I shared with Laura and Coral last time is what are we actually trying to do here? And one of the metrics that you can pay attention to is becoming a 4A factory in your team. You want to become known as, if you join this team, they help you get to 4A. And that 1A to 4A window is your apprenticeship training grounds to basically be independent of any hand holding or any very direct mentorship and support from 4A onwards, right? And if you help 4 or 5 people go 4A, then now you're 6A.
Balazs, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Going back to the first thing that you said there, all of this that you just explained, I can absolutely implement into my business. And I'm excited to go back and kind of do the audit of what have I left out that I haven't given them. But the thing that's coming to my mind right away that I've left out, I don't really love because I feel like I'll feel bad telling them this. But when I bought my products, I did nothing with my business for a year, but I watched weekly huddles and I watched master classes every single week. I laid foundations in my mindset. And then for 2.5 years after that, before my business really blew up, I still did that. And I've fed my mind. I learned the skills, all of that. So I had 3.5 years of laying out those foundations and working on my mindset, skill set, all that before my business blew up. And I've kind of left that part out of it. But how do I say to my team, well, I've been doing this for 3.5 years before I got the results. You don't have the mindset yet. You don't have the skill set yet. So I either say that to these brand new beginners, or I just go find people that aren't beginners anymore and the ones who've already been in the personal development space and working on that kind of stuff and have the skills already.
You can do both. I mean, at the end of the day, the training portion, the mindset portion is experience based, right? So what happens is that if we dig into everybody's story a little bit more, we will identify transferable experiences from their past that have provided additional advantages in their Enagic business.
Okay.
Right? So if you have a past where you were a server or a bartender for a period of time, transferable skills, even though you don't think so, because you're like, I was serving burgers and beers at a restaurant. How does that have anything to do with magic? It's like, it's people skills. It's being quick, right? Because every scenario you're getting thrown and you're improvising and you're able to like handle things. Sometimes it's positive. Sometimes it's de-escalating situations where drunk people are treating you a way that you shouldn't be treated, and how you like, instead of making it worse, you disarm them with your words and your approach and stuff. This is all very like tactical training that you develop just being in it. So then all of a sudden you get into a sales environment with Enagic and you're on the phone and you get thrown curveballs and questions and maybe attacked with, this is a pyramid scheme and you're a scammer or something like that you're not expecting. And you have all this background in bartending and dealing with drunk people, and you're like, it doesn't even phase you. You're like, hey man, relax, da da da, and you kind of disarm them on the phone. Whereas a new person with no background in people skills, communication, customer service, those kinds of roles, they're going to freeze, hang up, get scared, quit the business. So those things are very different from each other. Same thing with owning a traditional business, any sort of traditional business, self-employed business, massive convertible skills and experience over into Enagic. So what we need to recognize is you either are finding people with previous transferable skills where they're not technically a complete beginner to anything related to being successful in what we do, or you're giving them manageable expectations that are like, look, if this is your first time exploring this, that's perfectly fine, but it will take you a period of time of learning, of showing up, of doing personal growth, getting to understand yourself better, working on these skills, role playing, practicing, listening, being around others in live events and conferences and conventions, to essentially get that foundation for you to then be an overnight success story 3, 4, 5 years later. And then sometimes that can be intimidating. People can say, well, that's a really long time. Like, I need to make money right now, which is totally fair, right? Like, I get it. You got to pay your bills now, not in 3 years or 5 years from now. I get all that. But what's the alternative? Like, you're going to have to pay those dues somewhere regardless. So if you are paying those dues here part time while you have a full time job or doing something else, it ends up being a side hustle or a side growth focused thing. But when it does eventually click, you can fast track and accelerate yourself so much sooner than had you been doing it in a more traditional sense in like a corporate job or traditional business or otherwise. So that's what you're really selling to people effectively on these sales calls, is not just the products, not just the opportunity, not just the legacy income in 682-3. You're selling them on planting their flag for longevity. You're selling them on the future growth, that this is a long-term play. And once it finally clicks, it has such an exponential leverage scalable potential that if you backdate your income 10 years from now and you spread it out evenly over the course of like day one since you joined this business all the way until where you are today, it will be shocking how much you got paid in the early days, where technically you got paid nothing in those years. Like, even you, like if you took all the income that you've made in Enagic, you divided it annually equally, so let's call it 5 years, all the money you made, divided it by 5 years, and actually paid yourself in hindsight for the first 3.5 years of you learning, growing, listening to calls, etc., you'd be like, well, damn. Like, if you would have just told me that I'd make that much money basically going on these calls and going through the motions and evolving as a person, I would have taken that deal. That's a freaking sweet deal. But that just doesn't work like that. Like, even now, GPM will do $300 million in sales this year. What are you even talking about? That is freaking insane. I literally remember day one when I was a 1A being like, how am I going to even make one sale? Like, you know what I mean? Now we're doing 300 million USD in a single calendar year across all of GPM. And 70% of that is paid out in commissions and bonuses. So then what we do is we take the total amount of time you've been in the business, right? This is just using my story as an example. So I've been in the business 12 years, will be 13 years March 1st, coming up on 13 years. So we've done over $1 billion in sales in those 13 years. But they were very little amounts in the first 3, 4 years. And then it started to pick up in year 5, 6, 7, 8, right? So then if we take the total amount of sales and divide it by 12 years, we're doing what? Like $80 million a year in year one. Did I do $80 million in sales in year one? Hell no, not even close. It was like, I think 350,000 in sales in a year. But if we just evenly distribute it and backdate it, $80 million a year since we started. This is how you need to basically be able to onboard somebody who has this linear mindset of, I trade my time for money, I get paid every single 2 weeks. Put in 2 weeks of work, I get a paycheck. Where you've probably seen those memes on the internet at some point where it's like, spend a year in a cabin in the woods with no internet and like get paid $1 million. You know, these kinds of things where it's like a trade-off. You've probably seen those before. So this is kind of like that. Is like, if you make zero sales and zero money for the next 3 years, however, you grow as a person, you understand yourself, you do personal development, you show up to calls, you practice the skills, you get clear on your brand, you start to authentically share on social media about like your vision, your goals, who you are, what you want to create. And then all of a sudden in year 3, you start to make sales and you start to make money. And by year 5, you're doing multiple 6 figures a year. And by year 7, you're doing 7 figures plus a year. Would that be worth it to you? Would you sign up for that deal? If it was in a contract, if it was like an agreement, would you take that deal? Yes or no? And then when the people start to go like, oh, okay, like I could see that, then you're going to sell someone a quad package and you're not creating that like get rich quick mentality. They gotta, if they don't make money, they get discouraged and they call it a scam and they give up. It's not about that, because you kind of presented to them a different path. And that doesn't mean it needs to take them so long, right? You're not saying you have to go slow. You're not saying it has to take you 7 years to make $1 million, not at all. But you're basically saying, what if it did? Worst case scenario, would it still be worth it? And if they say yes to that, you got yourself a solid business partner. Is this making sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, I love it.
But what a lot of people do is they shy away from this because it's not as sexy. It's not as attractive to be like, hey, it's going to take you 7 years to make money. Like, nobody gets excited for this. But that's actually the reality of entrepreneurship. It's the reality of learning these skills. And then alternatively, another really great example is around schooling. right? If you think about what some people are willing to do when it comes to post-secondary education, colleges, degrees, PhDs, masters, all these types of things, think about how many years somebody goes to school, gets into student loan debt, and then they haven't even made a penny in this career that they've chosen, and they have no problem doing that. Why? Because there's examples of people who are doctors and lawyers and brain surgeons and whatever these things are that take so much schooling to, become qualified to do it, where on the other end of all of that, one, it's something they're passionate about, like they love cutting people's heads open and playing with their brains. Cool, good for you. But they're also going to pay you like $500,000 a year, whatever the number is. And I'm willing to do all this schooling and do all that stuff. So at the end of 8 years or 12 years or whatever it is, I now get to begin my life making that much money. And I'm also like a bajillion dollars in student loan debt. And somehow they think that's a great deal. So in this business, we need to do something similar where we're like, look, there's no promises or guarantees that you're going to make anything at all. You might make $0 forever. However, we've also noticed that there is a possibility, there's a potential of people going 3, 5, 7, 10 years down the track where once they crack the code, once they're able to grow a business, once they're able to scale their income and so forth, everything that they thought they weren't earning in the early years gets paid back to them in a very significant way where it all ends up being worth it, when you look back in hindsight. And the amount of exchange is also very interesting, and it's so different to what most people understand. Like, I'll give you an example. In the first 2.5 to 3 years of building an Agic, I would do 3 to 5 sales calls or meetings or presentations every single day. Majority of them did not buy, and I just kept doing them anyways, right? That's a lot of work. 3 to 5 a day, not including following up, not including prospecting, not including content, not including training my team, just purely opportunities to sell. 3 to 5 a day, every single day, 7 days a week. And now I don't do any of that pretty much, very, very little of that. And I get paid like 300 times more a month than I did back then. That's what we're building here, but it's so hard to wrap your head around this of even being a thing until you're in it, you've lived it, you've gone through it, and you're like, so how did I just make that much money when I was in the Bahamas and Caymans and spending time with my family and like living it up, not working? Like I took all my stuff. Okay. I took my camera, like I have my phone, of course, but like I have a separate camera. I took my laptop. In 2 weeks, I didn't even open it. I was like, oh, I'm gonna work in the morning, I'm gonna do it. And then I like get home, I'm like, I didn't do nothing. And sales were crazy all the whole time I was gone. I think the most work I did was logging into my Nagic back office to see the sales. And I was like, things are still going awesome. Back to the beach. So it's very different than where it was. Okay. And so trying to articulate this to yourself personally, but also to your team and people getting started is a little bit of a tricky thing to do, but that's keeping it real. Now, alternatively, when you are dealing with someone more experienced, what you are looking for is someone who understands the formula for sales. They understand how to, for example, create a sales script. That's massively valuable, right? Because once you know how to do it, all you're doing is taking the product, the features and benefits, and the pricing, plugging it into this formula, and basically able to like do it over and over and over again. Same thing with running ads on social media. It's a skill set. Once you know how to log in to Meta and YouTube and Google and all these places and set up a campaign and know how to split test and all of these things, that's a skill that you have forever, like it's riding a bike. So now all of a sudden you're like explaining to somebody that they got to run Facebook ads to generate leads for this opportunity, for this offer. They don't look at you like cross-eyed and confused. They're like, no problem. I already have an ad account set up. I've already done this for other products. I've already been an affiliate for other things. It's not foreign language. That's how you go kaboom, right? Like if you explain ads to someone and they go, you can run ads on social media, or some dumbass comment like this, you're like, oh my gosh, it's going to be a while, guys. It's going to be a minute. I'm going to go need to make a tea so I can come back and explain the basics, right? And it's very deflating when you're at an advanced level in the company and you're trying to go fast to spend your time doing that. Now, there are exceptions, now you're successful. But I think there's a time and place where we love helping people that don't know anything about it because it makes us feel superior. It makes us like, it feeds our ego. Like, yeah, we're the shit because we know how to run ads and you don't. So let me show you, let me teach you. And that's all great and everything, but it gets boring eventually. Eventually, you're like, I want someone to join me who's smarter than me, has more sales ability than me, has more influence than me. So you go from wanting to be the person to wanting to be like not the person. And once you kind of make that adjustment, that's when your business blows up. Like, I love the fact that there's people more better at content and better at social media than me. Like, I watch their stuff and I'm proud that they're in my team. I'm like, damn, you're good at this. I'm not that good at this. Right? Whereas before I'd be like, my content's the best. Your content sucks. And now it's the opposite. I'm like, I just want to go online every single day and be like, I got a team of people better than me. I love that. But it wasn't like that in the early days. So, anyways, long story short is audit your processes and see if it's truly duplicatable and can be repeated by others to get those results. And then secondarily, bring in people with the expectation of this is a personal development business, and either you already have the foundations of personal development and skills that you're transferring from your past into this so that you can get off to a quicker start, or you have to accept the fact that in the beginning you are essentially someone in training and you're laying all the foundations that have nothing to do with sales and nothing to do with commissions and nothing to do with money. And you're actually realizing that those roots that you're developing will pay you massive amounts of money in the future, but you cannot get discouraged in the short term and be like, I'm doing everything and it's not working. It's like, you're just putting in the reps. You know what I mean? It's like, imagine going to a gym and picking up a dumbbell and doing some curls and then looking at your arms and being like, why aren't I so muscular with big arms like that guy? And then you ask that guy and he's like, never missed a day in the gym in 15 years. And you're like, oh, I get it. Not only that, but he's sleeping right. He's eating right. He's, protein is dialed, supplements, all these things. And you're like, I just did some curls. Where's my biceps? Like, that's kind of how people act with the business as well. Like, I went through the motions. I shared my story on Instagram. I made no money. It's like, nobody even watched that video, dude. You have 0 followers. Like, come on, let's slow down a second. So all of these things are important to be able to share with someone and give them like a grounded, real expectation of what's possible. And I think that that is missing in this industry a lot of the time because we're always trying to make it sound better than it is or faster than it can be. And I think it's better for us to undersell and overdeliver than it is to oversell and have them massively disappointed, right? Even another great example of this, when the K8 first came out, okay? We only had the SD501 prior to that. The K8 came out, we were all excited. It was white, it was nice, had like the iPhone display. We were all super excited about it. We sold out of K8s very quickly, okay? You couldn't get one. So everybody got disappointed because they were getting started with an adjunct, they're buying a K and their product was not coming for a super long time. So now we're having complaints, people want a refund, they say this business is a scam, there's no products, and we heard all this stuff. And all we did to undersell and overdeliver is when an adjunct told us it would be about 21 to 28 days before they would get their machine because they were making them in the factory in Japan and blah, blah, blah. We would tell them that we are so in demand, this is the hottest product on the market, that it's going to take them about 4 to 6 weeks for the product to arrive. So we flipped it rather than, oh yeah, this sucks, we're sold out, and just whining and complaining. We flipped it to our new person being like, no, listen, like this is the thing. Everybody wants one of these things. It's just really hard to get right now. You'll get it in 4 to 6 weeks. Now, what was happening is they were getting it in about 4 weeks, right? Because the real timeline was 3 to 4 weeks. We would tell them 4 to 6 on purpose. So they weren't even waiting for their machine for 4 weeks. They weren't even checking the front door or waiting for the delivery. And all of a sudden it would arrive as a surprise because they were expecting to start waiting next week and it came this week, even though that was way longer than the typical time that you would normally get your machine. So we just framed it differently. So this is the same thing in the business. Is like, oh yeah, you'll make your first sale in like 4 hours after you get your machine. And then they make it in like 4 months and they're like, this is the biggest scam because you lied to me, right? But if we tell them the opposite and we say, look, typically people get to 6A in like their first 1 or 2 years and they get to 6A in their first few months or something like that, then you've undersold and overdelivered. Does that make sense? So manage these expectations, because what a lot of the time we don't realize we're doing in sales processes is we're adding extra like stuff from our own fears and insecurities to try to sell them. But then they hold on to that as like fact. They're like, oh, you said this and you said that. But when we do the opposite, where we say like, what if this did take you 3 years to make 6 figures? Would you still do it? And then what you're doing is you're almost taking it away from them. And they're like, yeah, I'll still do it. It still makes a lot of sense. Like, what else am I going to do? What other opportunity out there could have more potential than this over the next 3, 5, 10 years? And once they realize there isn't one that's better, and then they're still willing to go the distance with that level of commitment, then any results they produce faster is all a bonus.
Love that. That's so helpful. Thank you so much.